Once again, hello and welcome, guys, to the Improvement Season podcast. With me, Pascal Thor, and the other guy called, wait a second, it was Steve Ho. Steve Ho, right? The hole and the floor on the mic again. So, another episode, once again, recorded at the same time as the other episode because Steve is going to...
I'm in Bude, Cornwall.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why we decided to do 2 episodes in a row once again. So for the people who watch us over on YouTube, again, we are not wearing the same stuff which we wore last week. It's basically still the same day, and it's just an hour later. So, without further ado, let's dive into the things we just wanted to talk about, and that is basically we are doing a Q&A, right?
Q&A time. Thank you for everyone who deposited their questions over on, I don't know if deposited is the right word, deposited their questions over on Instagram. And in fact, there's probably not much we'd mention over the last week that's happened, although Bude might be interesting to talk about my experience there. Mini cutting. Charlotte was not happy that I was mini cutting over the wedding. She's worried I'm going to be grumpy and moody, but I think it'll actually be fine. So,
by the way, because you brought that up, so Charlotte was dieting for the wedding as well, right?
She is dieting for the wedding as well.
She is dieting. Can I ask how it's going, or is it something you'd rather not want to discuss publicly?
Fortunately, she will not listen to this, so it doesn't matter. I believe it's going like, I don't ask her every day, but most days it's like she barely eats anything at work. She eats like 300 calories. I have no idea how she does that. And then she comes home and eats like the same amount. And I'm just like, hey. But she'll eat something like what did she have the other night? Mac and cheese. So how can you eat a 400 calorie portion of mac and cheese? That's so calorie dense. Why would you eat that?
two teaspoons even, and then you're finished with that one.
But fortunately, she doesn't really diet, barely ever, and never has really done a proper long diet. So yeah. So it's going okay, I think.
That was not that convincing. Yeah, I mean, Katie started dieting with me like 7 weeks then ago.
Nice. That's a consistent amount of time.
It is for her also the first diet ever, right? So she didn't really lose much on the scale, but she also started doing CrossFit on that time.
Why would Charlotte not actually train?
Hey, she just wanted to be a little bit more active again. So she was always into climbing, right? But I basically suggested her, hey, give CrossFit a try. Maybe it is for you and maybe it isn't, right? Because she wasn't really that type of gal who is into going into a gym, lifting for herself for 45 minutes or something. She needed more that kind of team atmosphere, a little bit more dynamic movements, a little bit of difference every once in a while. And she loves it. She really loves it. And she started while she was doing, or started a little bit earlier than when the diet started. But she didn't really see that much of a change on the scale weight, which is absolutely all right, I think. It's more about learning a little bit more about nutrition, or building a little bit more of awareness of what she is actually eating and consuming and how calorically dense things are. Because, I mean, there have been plenty of things she wasn't aware of how calorically dense these things are, right? And for the first time, she's tracking it. She's looking at the nutrition labels, and she's like surprised on what she was eating in the past. And even though she didn't really lose significantly much on the scale weight, there was definitely some body composition or recomposition going on. But it's funny because she's now dieting ever since I started, and she's not as committed. Let's put it that way. In the beginning, it was really, really committed, but now it's every second day. She's snacking here. She's coming home from work, and she's working right now in a kindergarten facility. And mate, it's so easy because when there's a child having a birthday, there's always a cake and stuff, right? And she's, of course, she's eating there because it is her first diet. She's not like as we are, as trained or practiced in that sense. And she's coming home and basically says, yeah, I had that piece of cake. And I'm always then asking her, okay, what is a little bit of cake or a piece of cake, right? I mean, the calorie content you consumed can be quite different in that sense. And yeah, that's why she's a little bit loose about it and not really that precise with everything. But it's funny that Charlotte is preparing for a wedding, Katie's cutting as well, and I just asked her for how long she wants to continue that approach, what she's running right now, because that doesn't lead her anywhere, and it just makes her feel like she's still dieting.
Yeah, so many people do that, especially females, I think, end up feeling that they're constantly on a diet and then do the odd bit of pieces. Yeah, it's like the typical case. So Charlotte, fortunately, obviously she's been with me for so long, so she can't help but have crazy awareness of everything. But she already had pretty good awareness of calories, but she doesn't take into consideration at all the macros. So her protein intake could be pretty much like 10 grams or something in a day, and it wouldn't matter to her. So I think if she was trying to get more serious with it, then she'd have to think about those things. But at the moment, it's just like she doesn't even have to think about how satiated she is, because it's just just trying to stick to it. If she, I'd love for her to be able to be a bit committed to it, but I'll be surprised if after the wedding she's really sticking to it at all. And the wedding is literally next week, so it's been 3 weeks.
Oh God, yeah, but I mean, it's probably going to be a decent wedding anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll make much difference here or there, but yeah, we'll see. Should we dig into the questions?
Yes, let's do that.
Cool. So let me have a look. So this is from, let me say his name, NJ_UFC_fan. So he has said, or she, ever miss winging a workout and doing an all-out arm day like recent Jeff Nippard video with John Meadows, I guess?
So you are, just to understand it correctly, you are missing a training session that was planned just to do a winging session?
So yeah, it's like, rather than doing your program session, just going into the gym and just doing whatever the hell you want, such as an all-out arm day.
So my thoughts are these. No, I've never done that. Even if we were together training, right? Both of us did our training. That was scheduled. But I do see the validity of it for some people when they're, meeting up with other people and just want to train together. I don't know. I don't know. I'm so conflicted about it because
it's you personally. It's directed towards you, I imagine. So
no, in that case, no.
I'm the same. I'm relating this to nutrition. It's just like I don't miss ever just going out and just eating whatever the hell I want. I'd see that the same way. It's just like a binge in some ways, just going to the gym and doing whatever the hell you want, no matter what you're doing. I only feel ill effects after it, just like binge drinking or something. I don't really miss doing that either.
Mate, this is exactly what I wanted to point out, and that is I only see one benefit from it, and the rest is only downsides, short term and long term. Probably because you are doing so much more volume for a specific body part. All you're doing is building up more fatigue that then has an impact on other future workouts. And the only benefit I see in that is hanging out with a body and just doing a fun session. But
I think short term, I can see it being fun and rewarding. Yeah. Just like binging would be. But long term, I just want to enjoy it. And loads of people, I know there'll be people watching this thing, we're boring as fuck, and we're boring as fuck. Like both me and Pascal are boring as fuck.
Totally. Absolutely boring motherfuckers. And also super unsexy when it comes to the advice we are putting out.
It's true.
Sorry.
Right, let's go to Patrick, your client. So that's Patrick _EXSC.
Patrick, my man.
He has said, dealing with self-doubt / thinking you aren't doing enough during training, nutrition, life. So self-doubt and feeling like you're not doing enough. How do you deal with that? And actually, that kind of relates a bit to the last episode where I talked about during my contest prep and wanting to do everything. You kind of talk about those people who don't leave anything kind of no stone unturned, that sort of approach. And that's what I wanted for my contest prep. And I did struggle with it because there's times at which it isn't a case of working harder, it's a case of working smarter. And sometimes the harder thing to do isn't what you think is harder, it's actually harder to pull back than push. So it is a really difficult thing to balance. And it's, I think, having trust, and we talk about this so much, having trust in the process. Once you've got your bases down, once you've got your foundational principles in place, follow it through for a long period of time, keep data, track it. If things are going as appropriate, then you can't really ask yourself of doing more unless you know you're doing things that are purposely setting you back, like taking random workouts, binging, that sort of thing. If you're doing everything else, then you're getting the best you can out of what you're putting in. And this is a common thing with our followers, with the thought process of people. Everyone always wants more, and that's understandable, but sometimes you can't get more. I think we are in an age of social media where there are potentially unrealistic results being shown online, and we expect ourselves to have the same. But quite often, if you look at what some of those people are doing, they're getting results despite what they're doing, not because of what they're doing. So as long as you're a smart cookie, which I know Patrick is, and he's been coached by Pascal, so I know he'll be doing some incredible things. And sometimes and I had a client recently actually who was like, I feel like in the evenings, I end up coming home and I'm on social media for like an hour, just relaxing. And it's my downtime after I've set all my kids, like children, to sleep, and we've cooked them dinner and I've done my job in the day and I've trained. I feel like I should be like revising in that hour of time, maybe learning something new. And I was like, mate, if you end up trying to force yourself to have no downtime, no relaxation time, I don't imagine that's going to be sustainable, and you're not going to be able to like sleep well and everything else. There's always, you can't always do more. With like, that's life MRV, if
Absolutely.
you will.
I have so many thoughts on that. So first, we've talked about it a couple of times in the past when it comes to something like FOMO, so fear of missing out, and also imposter syndrome, that you have the feeling that you need to always do more and more and more and more. And I think it's just a common thing, especially for ambitious people who fall into the misconception that they aren't doing enough, and then they try to do as much as they possibly can. But then every once in a while, that leads to even less what you are achieving. So what I mean by that is, let's just say that you're stuffing your entire day. Sure, it feels like you achieved a lot and you had a productive day, but it doesn't matter what you're putting in, but only the results and the outcome matter. And that isn't dictated by how much time you are putting into a certain thing. So just to give another example, Sweden has played with, I think, 30 hours work week, was it, instead of 40 hours as a norm. And they showed that people were able to achieve the same amount of work in less time, because they knew that they only had a certain time window available for them, and they better made sure to actually get all the work done in that time window, right? Only because you're doing more doesn't necessarily mean that it was more productive or that you have better outcomes, right? It's so funny because our society created machines and technology to relieve them or to help them and aid them in productions and productivity in general, and mostly to save some time. But funny enough, our society is working more than ever before, even though that machines and technology should or have a main purpose of saving some time for us, right? And it's the same when it comes to these kind of things, when it comes to work and stuff. And that's why I think that only because you invested more time into something, only because you did more, doesn't necessarily mean that you get more out of it. And before I'm ending that, it's the same when it comes to volume, for example. It's not guaranteed that doing more will result in more, right? But what is definitely sure, if when you're ticking the boxes consistently, you will probably eventually get to your desired outcome, right? And you can still make some adjustments along the way. Maybe it will take you a little bit more time to get there, but doing just more for the sake of doing more and feeling a little bit more better about yourself doesn't guarantee that you're getting there quicker, or that it doesn't guarantee that you get more out of it.
I only have one thing to say, and that is JOMO.
JOMO? What is that?
Joy of missing out.
Yeah. I think actually some people do have that.
Joy in the missing out. So, brilliant answer, Pascal. Let's get to the next question, which is from... let me just say. Yes_Benarib. So, interesting name. Do you think of if we gain weight every week in a mass phase, we should always add weight on body weight movement? So something like a pull-up or a dip and adding weight as well as your body weight. So I think quite often it depends how fast you're gaining, but you probably don't have to add resistance to those exercises if you're gaining body weight in your off season, which is actually a really good point, because during your dieting phases, people often, if you then don't add weight, then you might think you're getting better, and it's like, well, actually you're just getting lighter. So when I get people to track these, I try and and I'm really bad at doing it myself, is putting in my body weight plus whatever I'm using, and that's the total load that you're using. That's the best way to go about it. I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
No, this is the way I track these body weighted exercises as well. Plug in, so instead of leaving it on my spreadsheet like blank, only because I'm doing body weight, I plug in my body weight together with the weight being used. But I also know that when it comes to something like pull-ups, or just take a look at really heavy people, like I'm not talking just about obese, but especially also well-trained individuals, let them do some pull-ups. They don't do insane amounts, and just take a look at then calisthenics or something, right? Most of the time they are pretty light as well, and they are efficient at the movement. So I think it was a really interesting question, though, whether it is a good idea to add some weight in conjunction to adding body weight. But when you gain at a decent pace, you are, so to speak, micro-loading from week to week and workout to workout. So I think that this should probably be plenty, especially if you're then progressing via reps as well. So you have a rep range from, let's say, 8 to 12 repetitions. Then you are progressing via reps. You are micro-loading with your body weight from week to week. And the same thing you can do the other way around. When you were to lose weight, you are actually decreasing the load each and every single week by, for some people, even up to a kilogram.
So it's funny actually. I do tend to increment a little bit on pull-ups, but it is always like the smallest amount, because I end up gaining a pound maybe that week. That is a pound of extra.
So I really do appreciate questions like these, because it makes me think. And it makes me realize that there are a couple of things I'm missing out every once in a while in my own programming, and especially when it comes to my clients, because I have my spreadsheet laid out. I have some of my clients do pull-ups, chin-ups, all these kind of things. And then every once in a while, you take a look at the repetitions and the areas, and you don't see the progression in the reps anymore, right?
They're getting fat as fuck.
Yeah, maybe they're just getting fatter. And the other way around holds true as well. They might seem to progress some paper, but they are only getting lighter. Yeah. Or they, in the week itself, right, when they had maybe even 2 sessions, it could potentially be that the one day was a higher weigh in, compared to the other day, or even on a week-to-week basis, we know that weight fluctuates massively, and that even if you are gaining, it could potentially be that the next week at the same day you were a little bit lighter because it was just like because of circumstances. And a really, really interesting question, and it made me think and reconsider some of my approaches there as well, that I have to take a closer look at that as well. So thank you very much.
Cool. So we get to the next one, which is from Abood Gaines. And he has asked, best psychological hacks for the off-season, goal setting, etc. Well, these sort of questions I'm really bad at, because it's not something I ever really struggle with, because I just know, well, I guess for me at least, I have the goal of competing again and wanting to be better. But in reality, I always think these sort of people asking the questions are looking for some sort of motivation or something along those lines. In reality, you'll be the same as me, Pascal. And I think the best people who get the best results is all, and if Jeff Alberts, for example, it's all about just consistency, routine, and just once you're in that flow state, you just go. Like, you just go to the gym at this time, you eat your meals at this time, you're just there, and you don't really have to think about, oh, this is my goal, this is why I have to go to the gym. I think that sort of mindset can sometimes be a bit too short term.
Mate, absolutely. And that was exactly what I was thinking when I heard that question. Heck, I always understand that when a hack, or when you're looking for a hack, it is kind of finding a backdoor and a shortcut on something, right? Or finding a way to, once again, get re-motivated, get back on track, find the purpose for yourself. And these are things that you have to figure out yourself. And we had this one episode where we talked about motivation and stuff like that. And when you're always looking for external motivators, then you're probably at some point going to fail, because you didn't really build the fundamentals that are important to stick with something for a long period of time. And especially then when it comes to trying to find hacks for the off season, I don't think that there are any kind of hacks. Sure, there are probably things that can make your life easier, and that potentially makes it easier for you to stick to a certain program or I don't know, macros or something. But that, once again, is then so individual that this is something we can't possibly answer here.
Yeah, I think it's very much, I mean, it's just like brushing your teeth in a sense. Like, you just go and you get into a flow state. And I think the only thing that people need to be careful of, and it's definitely something I've got wrong myself in off seasons, is getting complacent, where I just go and do my workouts. And I think if I've worked hard in the gym and I'm eating some food and I don't feel hungry, that I've done my job. And that doesn't get you past intermediate stage. You need to start actually forcing things a little bit more. And sometimes that is a mental thing. I know, like, we have some clients sometimes and we look at their training, and sometimes we have to have a real talk, like, your intensity is not where it needs to be. We need to train a little bit harder. That doesn't often actually happen. Normally it's, if anything, the other way. But sometimes you can get a bit complacent, and especially when you're more trained. So it's a case of, getting into that flow state, getting that routine, but checking up on yourself all the time to make sure you're actually doing the job you should be.
No, absolutely. And one thing to add there is just from my personal experience. So what changed for me this time around, and I think why this cut is going so much more smoother this time, is because I decided for myself that I don't want to half-ass things anymore. And I mean it like consciously, that decision. Because it's so easy to just always like be, come on, I can squeeze in, I don't know, whatever it is, like a cheat meal. Or when I think many people can relate to that, when you decided to cut, then after 2 weeks you feel small, and then you're deciding that you're not as fat as you thought you are, then you're going back to gaining again, and after 4 weeks you think that you're fat, and then you're going back, and all you're doing is actually switching lanes. That ends up with you spinning your wheels instead of sticking to a certain goal and stick it out and just follow the plan. Because after you've done that, you are probably so much more happy about where you're at that given point, and you finally actually made some progress. And this is something I decided to do for myself. Like, it was a conscious decision of mine to say, okay, no fucking half-assing anymore. When there is ever the time where you are lacking willpower, where you're in doubt of things, stick it out, stick to the plan, and then you can still reevaluate whether it was a good decision or not, but not just always this back and forth between the decisions you're making.
Cool, brilliant. We get to the next question. This is again, and I'm going to ask this question. He did ask two, but the last question was good, so I will ask this one from ilyes_benarib again. And he has asked, for the people who mini-cut don't work very well on them, how should they manage increase in body fat during their mass? So for people who don't mini-cut very well, how would you manage body fat? And I think the obvious answer, and I'm not sure we need to go into much depth, I don't know, just a less aggressive mini cut. And as you normally would, even for people who use mini cuts, don't bulk too aggressively. Do that in a kind of a lean matter, or controlled matter.
I find this question interesting due to the fact that it seems like doing a mini cut became the norm now. That it's the only way to go about things, which is definitely not the case. If you know that a mini cut isn't working for you because of who knows whatever reason it is, and it doesn't really matter what the reason is, then you know it yourself, basically, right? And this is a good thing. You know that mini cuts at that point in time right now doesn't work for you. So why not take a less aggressive approach? Call it a conservative cut, and then gain for a longer period of time, and keep the rate of weight gain a little bit on the lower end as well, and treat it more as. And I really hated that the mentality about old school rates of cutting became really truly old school now, and the same applies to gaining. That it's not feasible anymore to gain at a slower rate and to cut for longer. And that's something like, once again, what I just pointed out, gaining for, 12, 16 weeks and then cutting for 4 weeks became basically the norm now.
I think it depends on the population, because I think a lot of people are still under the long and slow approach.
Maybe we are just in a different kind of circle.
I think it very much depends on how you're setting things up. I think both can be very appropriate and both bring great results. It's when people do it inappropriately when it screws people up. That as always, like if anything, if you follow the instructions on the back of the packet, you're going to do it right. If you don't, then you could potentially do it completely wrong. But I certainly have done this approach with clients where mini cuts, we've discussed it, it's not appropriate, we're going to take a slow approach. Why not? That works absolutely fine as well. So yeah, it seems to, I think probably our followers think that it's something they must do, whereas it's actually something that's like, it's actually an advanced tool that maybe you want to think about doing. And it's probably appropriate for a lot of our audience, but equally not for some of them. So
yeah, maybe it's just that I'm biased because it is such a common thing or common practice in our realms, and maybe outside of it, it's unheard of still, but yeah. I'm a little bit biased in that regard.
Yeah. So next question is from Spiridonov_19.
Probably from Grace.
Maybe, yeah, is a bit of a
the way you pronounce
name.
it.
Spiridonov. So they said, what is better for hypertrophy, 2 times upper/lower in a week or 4 times full body? Right. So that's going to provide very little value without any context there. Probably, I don't know, my simplest answer would be if volume was matched, the result's probably going to be pretty damn similar. But for someone who's more novice, the 4 times per week is probably a more efficient method, whereas anyone who's more advanced would probably do better from splitting it up into more sessions with the upper and lower split.
No, I have nothing more to add, except for one thing, and that is if you were to be Greek, a Greek, then I would say probably it ends with an S instead of a V, which wasn't the case now, right?
Yeah, it was a V.
Because then he would probably be Russian or something.
Oh,
like
Milkanov.
Spiritakos instead of Kov. Anyway, let's move on to the next question.
Okay, so I'm going to get one from someone we haven't heard from. So this guy follows us quite closely. Daniel Bazak has asked.
Yes, Daniel, my man, always commenting on YouTube
yes.
videos.
He's all over
man,
the shop.
Daniel.
So he has asked, I hope it's not a stupid question. Do you guys think hair removal is a crucial part of bodybuilding? It's not a stupid question.
Steve, you have the best story about it. I know that you talked about it a couple of times already, but tell us a little bit about your first contest and the stage.
So hair removal is 100% crucial because it will cost you points and it's a very easy thing for you to do. So for my first competition that I ever did, I wasn't aware that armpits were some of the places that you needed to have removed. And I had armpit hair and I was told by the judges that I got marked down for that. I'm not exactly sure. I guess it hides some sort of definition somehow, or maybe it looks a bit unclean. I'm not sure. But facial hair, if you're thinking about like, you don't need to shave your head. I just did that as a bit of a random spare of the moment thing. I'm not going to do it again, I don't think. But yeah, just full body hair. You want that off. If you're thinking about like forearms, areas of your back, if you're not a hairy guy, like your butt cheeks, these are things I considered. As much hair as you can get off is always going to lead to a better result. But if you've got a little bit of hair in like on your forearms or on in these areas, I don't think you need to be concerned about it. It's more so just like your legs, underarms, your chest, stomach area. If you've got a hairy back, then that's about it.
Yeah. So nothing more to add. I just want to suggest one thing to Daniel, and that is I want you to go to a waxing place and ask for Brazilian waxing without doing research before that.
If he doesn't know what that is, I'll be surprised. So we have, what I would say is for hair removal, I actually did it too soon this time round. I think you can get away with doing it like a couple of weeks out or even a week before, or some people even do it a few days before.
So can you just recap of how you went about it? So did you shave yourself first and then, I don't know.
Such a funny topic. So I personally used like a beard trimmer and then I used like just a razor for my body. I've tried like hair removal creams and stuff and they just seem to be awkward and not particularly great. Clients have used them, the hair removal products, like Veet is one of them in the UK at least. They seem to work really absolutely fine. But whatever you do, I would probably trial it first. And if you are shaving close to the skin, do it a bit out because some people will get rashes. I've had rashes before. If you have a small rash, the tanning product will cover it up. But if you have a major like blowout, that won't be good. And I think having removed the hair probably like 5 weeks out is not a bad idea because then actually you get to see more of the physique. And that's why I did it a bit earlier because I could actually see more of what was going on because that's why we removed the hair because it does hide some of the detail.
Perfect.
Cool. And then you want to moisturize, you want to exfoliate beforehand as well. All of these things come into practice. So whose question should we pick now? Okay, this is my client, oil. CDB. I'm so used to saying CBD. CDB Fitness. So this is Charlie, who recently posted his squats in the group. Said, how much emphasis should we as bodybuilders place on accessories that get us strong in the main lifts? I think this is I don't know if you want to start, Pascal, actually. Or I have some immediate thoughts that come to mind.
I have also some thoughts, and so my gut instinct and also from experience, I would say not much at all, because I think that my key indicators for getting stronger are always the barbell compound lifts. And only because you're getting strong in a specific movement that potentially carries over doesn't necessarily mean that it was due to you gaining muscle mass in that specific area. I mean, which study was it once again? It took a look at the neurological aspect of things, and with you doing a specific movement over and over again, there's just a higher motor unit recruitment going on, and also the neurological adaptation that is just happening that then potentially carries over to that other lift. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are building some, or that you have gained some hypertrophy along the way. And also it could potentially be that you are right now just more well rested, better, well fed as well. And once you are starting to not have that anymore, which could be like 2 weeks later, your performance would decrease. And then did you lose muscle along the way? Probably not. I don't know. Maybe it was too much off tangent here where I went. But what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think your comments kind of stem from my thoughts. And I think it's really a difficult one for people to get a mind round. And people might hear me say it and they might think that I'm saying something that I'm not. But bodybuilders generally don't need to focus on getting strong. It's more so the work that they do as a byproduct of getting them big gets them stronger as well. Because if we were to focus on getting as strong as possible, we wouldn't train like bodybuilders, we train like powerlifters. So the fact is that you don't want to focus on your accessory lifts to get you stronger. You want to focus on your accessory lifts to get you bigger, which might consequently lead to you getting stronger. Hopefully that made sense. And I think your answer on like the neurological adaptations and things kind of helps explain that reasoning as well. Cool. So Chrissy has asked a question.
Chrissy!
Who, actually, out of interest, have you had any discussions with Chrissy recently? I saw that he posted on his Instagram, and people will be able to find Chrissy's Instagram, that he's kind of, I think he's gunning at 2020 again.
He is aiming for 2020, yeah, but didn't really have the chance to get more into depth about it. But he is living in Potsdam, where I'm about to study, and I'm moving probably there as well, at least second apartment, because I simply can. No, that's not true. It's just a logistic decision I've made. And probably and hopefully, Chrissy, I didn't tell you about it, but hopefully we get a training session in together at some point, and you can tell me a little bit more about the 2020 project.
Sweet. So Chrissy has asked, choosing your shows, what do you guys consider when planning your season? So I guess for me, first of all, I think about, and I guess I had to think about a little bit more than what most natural competitors have to do, is I pick the shows that I can compete in, because obviously the BNBF have a 7-year drug-free rule, and I had to take a prescription of TRT for a period of time to recover my health, whereas the UKDFBA and the MPA were fine with a doctor's note and passing the polygraph, which I did. But next season I will be able to do the BNBF because it would have been over 7 years, which just shows how fucking old I am getting. And I pick federations that are well known, have a high caliber of athlete, and are well run. That's generally the ones I go for. And then in terms of actually picking the shows I want to do, for me personally, because the UK, they can be quite widespread. Like, I don't want to pick one in Scotland. I tend to pick ones that are in decent like travel distance, so I can at least travel there in one evening and get a hotel one night and then do the show. And then I plan around what else is going on in my life. So if I've got a holiday, then I can plan around that, those sort of things, but always planning backwards. I don't know if that really answered his question, but that's kind of some of the things I think about.
I think it was really well explained, and just trying to think of something to add there, but can't really think of any, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of knowing how much time you're going to need to get ready, and then once you work that out, see what shows are within that timeline, and then which ones like are good organizations, are in traveling distance to you. Something to consider is, I've seen this a few times where people qualify very early in the season, which I think can be great, but it also means potentially if you haven't got a good background in periodization of training and nutrition, you might try and hold this lean physique for months and months and months if you qualify for finals, which I think a lot of people end up dropping out, which is really sad to see. Again, if you then try and qualify for a late qualifier, there can be a risk of there being very high caliber of athlete there, which quite often happens because a lot of people like to qualify late because then there's not a lot of time till finals. Fortunately, that wasn't a problem for me last season, but it's something I've, after watching this season, have seen so many high caliber athletes qualify, not compete at finals because they can't hack it or whatever reason, there's something that comes up in that time. And I've also had even clients who have done late qualifiers where the caliber of athlete is so damn high that they just didn't have a chance because there's just outrageous quality there. So it's just something to think about. But if you're a first-time competitor, I wouldn't worry about those minor details. They're quite strategic thoughts that I've only had this season because I competed and did better than I thought, and I've had the time to look at other people compete.
No, fantastic.
Cool. I don't know do we have time for any more questions? We're at 35. We've been about 40 minutes.
Yeah, come on. Let's do one or two.
So this is from Wonky. Oh, wait, I need to actually say
Wonky.
He's Wonky Wild Shami, which is it's really bad when you know someone online by their Instagram name and you don't know their actual name.
Yeah.
I've forgotten his first name. I think it might be James. I apologize.
You know what's even more embarrassing? And this is, I think it's a habit I created or I've built when I was working in the media industry, because you met so many people in one single night because you've been at a different town each and every single day, basically, right? And you shook their hands, and when they told you their name, you didn't. Yeah.
It happens to me all the time.
Well, and it's so embarrassing if you then need to actually talk to them later on and you want to say bye or want to, I don't know, call the name and you simply don't know it anymore. And it's a habit I simply ingrained. And so if someone meets me in person and I forget their name, like just 2 seconds afterwards, I'm terribly sorry for that. But this is actually a bad thing. Instagram and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm
90% sure he's called James. He interviewed me on the Side Hustle podcast, which is quite a cool podcast if people don't know about it. He interviews some really interesting people over there.
Don't talk your way out of it anymore.
I'm so sure. I'm going to check afterwards that it is James, but I'm pretty sure he's called James. And he's at university young kid doing cool things, and he is asked, if you're 3 years down the line of a bulk yet still lean, should you mini cut, or is it just percentage of body fat?
So you know my take on the word should. So
you'll never say should.
Yeah, I think that hardly ever. I wouldn't say you should never use should. Right. But in that case, I mean, it really depends on whether you feel comfortable, what your goals are. Might it be a good idea to throw in a mini cut every once in a while? I think it probably will because of the sensitivity aspect and all that kind of stuff. I mean, gaining for extensive amounts of weeks, month on end, I think, at least from my intuition right now, doesn't really make sense so much to me. I think that, yes, when you're young, when you're new to training, stay in a caloric surplus for as long as possible, right? But then in your case, when you're there since 3 years already, I think it might be a feasible thing to do. But once again, it comes always back down to what are your goals. If you're only lifting to look decent, is there really a case for it? Perhaps. Is it really necessary? I don't know. Whatever your girlfriend says or boyfriend.
I absolutely agree. I think early on in your career, extended periods of time massing is a very, very good idea because your rate of growth is just so fast that you're not even going to put on significant amounts of fat in that time. The ratio of muscle to fat gain is skewed in your favor for once, whereas most of us is not. So we can't do that extended period of time. But once you get to about 3 years, which is maybe when I really did oh no, I think I competed actually. That was I had cut before then. And so I would say after 3 years, you probably are in a position where cutting is a good idea. What I will say is mini cutting is quite an aggressive approach. I think it requires experience of cutting. Yeah. And so I would suggest for this person to actually go through a normal cut if they wanted to cut, and maybe just do a period of maintenance and then go into a shorter normal cut, learn some skills that you can use to then mini cut potentially in future. I just think it might be a bit of I hate to call it like an advanced tool, but it's a very aggressive deficit. And if you haven't experienced that before, it could be pretty hard.
I think you can actually really call it that. And I think it's totally legit to call it that, because, I mean, cutting, if you've never experienced that before, you don't know what is about to happen, and you don't know what kind of tricks you need to implement here and there, how you can address certain situations of feeling hungry, maybe these small tools and hacks, so to speak, you can then implement, right? But I also want to give really props to James. So if that's James, that he's
James Walsham. I'm pretty sure it's James Walsham.
If he's stuck with a gaining phase for 3 years, especially in the beginner stages. I assume that it was beginner stages, or even if not, that he's stuck with that one, because too many people, and I'm victim of it myself. I've been in a caloric deficit for too long of my lifting career already. And I think I shot myself in the foot quite often because of that. So big props to you that you actually stuck with it for that long. And I think that it only pays off in the long term.
Mm-hmm. And the only thing I guess I'd explain, sometimes like when I mini cut, people will say to me, oh, Steve, you're still lean. You don't need to mini cut. Mini cuts are very, very short. They're not buying you that much fat loss. No. They're not buying you a huge amount. So you don't really want a mini cut when you're super fat. That is when you do a more moderate and longer extended cut, because that's more appropriate. So just bear that in mind. And I also use it as an opportunity to lower training volume a little bit and recover somewhat. So yeah, bear that in mind. Some people might have different terminology for these sort of things. So anyway, I think we'll call it there. Thank you, James, for your last question. And we're going to kick myself if his name isn't James. I've repeated it so many times. And I guess we'll catch you guys soon.
But before we end here, there's a really good chance that his name is actually James, because I mean, it is quite a common name. And I think that, isn't it like either John or James when people, you found out.
James Walsham.
Isn't it either John or James when people like try to come up with an English name?
Pretty much. They're very predictable names. Cool. So, guys, we will catch you soon. Take care.
Guys.